This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Council meeting. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM.
This meeting of the Eau Claire City Council will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Duax?
Here.
Emmanuel?
Here.
Kincaid?
Here.
Klinkhammer?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Mitchell?
Here.
Strobel?
Here.
Von Hayden?
Here.
Worthman? Zhang?
Here.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Monday, November 11th, 2013 session of the Eau Claire City Council. Before we embark on our work this evening, I just did want to take a moment, as it is Veterans Day, to express my gratitude to Minnesota Wire and Cable for the Veterans Day celebration today. It was a solemn and yet celebratory event, and also to express on behalf of Council our appreciation to veterans who have served and to those who are still serving in active duty on behalf of our country. We thank you. Council has a short agenda this evening with just a couple public hearings, one regarding rezoning and one regarding some official mapping. After our public portion of the meeting, however, we will be adjourning into closed session to attend to two items as that part of our duty. If you are here to speak to Council tonight, when I introduce the item of interest to you, you can approach the podium and speak to the microphone about the item that's on your mind. We may have a question for you once you're done speaking, so if you don't mind lingering at the podium, that would be very helpful. You do not have to speak on any item, but if you desire to, we're anxious to hear your comments and would welcome them. With that introduction, and thank you to those of you who are joining us on community television and streaming at cvctv.org. We appreciate that service for our citizens also. The first of our agenda items this evening is item 1, an ordinance rezoning property along County Trunk Highway T, north of Folsom, for the Wildridge Golf Course from a TR1A to R1. Mr. Tufte.
This is the property. This is Kane Road and Folsom. Council annexed this property 2 weeks ago. Also in your packet is the site plan for the project. This was approved by Plan Commission at their meeting last week. The parking lot for the golf course remains relatively the same. The new clubhouse is under construction in approximately the same site as the old clubhouse. Council approved the development agreement for utility construction to that clubhouse, also at your last meeting 2 weeks ago. And there's what the new clubhouse will look like. The comprehensive plan map does identify the area as a golf course. The rezoning to an R1 does allow golf courses by conditional use permit. Plan Commission also approved the conditional use permit for this project and has recommended approval of the rezoning. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Tufte. Questions from Council? Councilmember Duax.
I have a question. You mentioned it's being rezoned R1. Now, the way golf courses are treated, there can be on any type of zoning? Can they just be
any
in
residential zoning?
Only in residential?
By conditional use permit, yeah.
And does the conditional use permit also permit then a restaurant?
Yes.
So you can in an R1 area?
As long as it's part of the clubhouse, is operated as part of the clubhouse.
Okay,
yes.
that's what I was kind of wondering about. Is that on the site of the same, where the current clubhouse is?
Yes, same site. They tore the old one down, and the new one has footing and foundation permits, and they have started construction.
The purple property is all of which we annexed?
Yes.
And that was, where is then the city boundary then follows the dashed?
It now follows the outer dash line here, yes.
Okay. So it does connect to properties north of there that are in the city.
All of this is north, and all of this is in the city, yes.
Okay. What if that golf course decided they wanted to subdivide and have a residential development? Is that
They would-
possible?
They'd have plat review by Plan Commission and City Council if it was single-family development. If they looked at some other type of development, there'd be rezonings,
Yeah.
site plans, and plat that come before the bodies.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tufti. Councilmember Zhang, one question?
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Is it this golf course, is it the one on Highway 312 and King, that on the west side? Is it the one?
It's just south of that one. That one on the highway is Mill Run. The one just south of that is the Wild Ridge. They're both owned by the same group of folks. There's actually 2 golf courses there.
Okay, with that proposal for a new clubhouse, is it one right now, old one or existing one right now, or?
The one for Mill Run remains in the same place. The old one for Wildwood Ridge has been removed and replaced by this new one in the same location.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
And based on what you said, then Mill Run is already in the city, right?
Wild Ridge?
Golf course? No,
Yes.
Mill Run Golf Course.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Okay, so,
Correct.
because the new boundaries then will be to the
Includes
west of
both golf-
Wild Ridge.
Yep.
So it'll encompass the whole thing. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I see no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Tufti. Members of the public here to speak about the rezoning? Yeah, rezoning in Wild Ridge. Anyone? Seeing none, the chair will close item 1. Take up item 2, which is an ordinance amending the official map by deleting Hendrickson Drive Service Road from 151 feet east of Craig Road to West MacArthur Avenue. Mr. Jensko.
This is the map that's in your council packet. And to refresh your memory, let's put north to the top. In 2007, the City Council officially mapped an alignment to bring the Hendrickson Drive frontage road out to West MacArthur. And the purpose for that was to reduce congestion and backups at the signalized intersection of Craig Road and Hendrickson Drive, sometime referred to as Highway 37. And that went into place, but the road was not constructed there. Just last year in 2012, with the site plan for Metro Crossing, I want to make sure I get north to the top. There was a site plan for a large apartment building here called Metro Crossing, which also provided for a link to come out to West MacArthur. And so, in fact, the road is being built in this alignment. The council approved that contract back in July. So what we have tonight is kind of the housekeeping to eliminate the official mapping at this location. And then tomorrow's agenda will have the right-of-way dedication for this and the formal action to remove this from the official mapping. So having said that, if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Larson?
That piece of land where the current roadway is,
Through here?
yep, through there, that will still be retained by the city? I mean,
Well,
that's still city property?
It's actually state right-of-way through
Oh,
there.
state.
The frontage road is on the state. Kind of works that we're responsible for maintaining the frontage road, but it's still on their right-of-way. So a car will not be able to travel through here. There'll be curb and gutter on this cul-de-sac with driveway access into Adams Automotive, but pedestrians will be able to get through.
Okay.
So all
Is that-
traffic will have to come out to West MacArthur.
Okay. I got a call from the property owner there, and it sounded like he might be interested in purchasing that land if it was possible, but I
And-
directed him to Mr. Tufti.
And we've referred them, he's talked to us too.
Oh,
We've
okay.
referred him to the state.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councilmember Duex?
Along the same line, when we first talked about this a few years ago, I thought the state was going to vacate that and then give it to the city, and then the city could negotiate what happens to it from there in terms of, i.e., sell it or what? Is that,
That might have been part of the discussion. It's not happened.
and is the state not interested in the vacation of it?
Usually they're not. I don't know. I've not been involved in those discussions.
Well, has anyone? I mean, because that's what we were told back 5-6 years ago. Somebody must have been.
I don't recall staff saying that the state would do that. I recall maybe some individuals had hoped that that could happen.
Yeah, well, I do remember some discussion, but
Perhaps Councilmember Duex, given Councilmember Larson's question, there will be another avenue of inquiry that will open up some discussion about the disposition of that property. So you'll be following up with Mr. Tufte and helping at least the landowner make that connection.
I don't know who he would talk to with the state. I presume you guys gave him someone to call at the state?
Yes.
Okay, so,
And if he has
You know,
further
that-
questions, he can call me, and I will help connect him.
yeah, I don't know if he's, makes any difference to him whether he purchases it from the state or the city. He just, I think he wants to expand his parking lot, but I don't want to speak for him, but that's what it sounded like.
Either way, it would just open up an avenue of discussion about this parcel. We'll see what happens. Parcel, that's probably not the right word. Something.
Right of way.
Right of way. Any other questions? I see none. Thank you, Mr. Jensko. Are there members of the public here to speak about the official map deleting Hendrickson Drive? Anyone here? Seeing none, the chair will close item 2, and in so doing, close the public portion of our meeting, and thank citizens who are in chambers that politely remind them that the City Council will now be convening into closed session to discuss the terms and conditions of an agreement between the cities of Eau Claire and Altoona concerning wastewater services, which for competitive and bargaining reasons may be discussed in closed session within the provisions of Section 19.85, Paren 1, Paren E of the Wisconsin statutes, and to discuss evaluation data, goals, and performance objectives with the city manager, an employee over whom the city council exercises responsibility, which is also permitted in closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Paren 1, Paren C of the Wisconsin statute. On a motion by Councilmember Emanuel, seconded by Councilmember Larson to enter into closed session, is there discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Duex?
Aye.
Emanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis? Aye. Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden? Aye. Worthman?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
We will return to your program after a short break. Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM. We now return you to your program. This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Council meeting.
This meeting of the Eau Claire City Council will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Duex? Here. Emanuel?
Here.
Kincaid?
Here.
Klinkhammer? Here. Larson?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Mitchell?
Here.
Strobel? Von Hayden? Worthman? Jean?
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Tuesday, November 12th, 2013 legislative session of the Eau Claire City Council. During its legislative session, the council deliberates and takes action on the agenda items before us. We have prepared for this responsibility by working with citizens, by working with staff, by working amongst ourselves with our constituents, and by reading the considerable amount of materials in our packets. And we are ready this afternoon to exercise our responsibility. Thank you to citizens who are joining us in chambers and those of you who are viewing at community television and streaming at cvctv.org. We welcome all of you to our meeting this afternoon. We do have important items on our agenda, so let us begin. The first order of business is the consent agenda. Do council members have questions regarding any item on the consent agenda? Councilmember Duex.
I have a question about number 6, the columbaria to cemeteries.
I see Mr. Qualla approaching. Thank you, Mr. Qualla. A question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How many columbaria do we have currently in our cemeteries?
Currently 2, 1 in each cemetery.
How do we amortize the cost of those? I mean, the charges for the burials within and oh, there we go.
I may be able to help with this chart that we have. Our current columbarium are 72 niche capacity each. Based on, and the new ones we're proposing are also 72 inch. Based on the average cost of the columbarium, the new columbarium, which is would be about $19,000 for the new ones, and averaging about $1,300 per space. Over time, the net revenue from those sales would be in the neighborhood of $70,000.
I see. I hate to ask a question like, what's the life of a columbarium? But there's really nothing to deteriorate once the burial has taken place. It's
correct. And then in the spec that we have written, it's lifetime warranty with the product and work.
Depends on whose lifetime that is.
That's true.
The other question is, how competitive is that with respect to other venues where columbarium are available?
The charges or the rates that we charge, we're right in the ballpark with everybody else that has similar.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Passages. You bet.
Thank you again, Mr. Qualla. Seeing no further questions. Councilmember Mitchell, sorry.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank the city clerk for the minutes from the last meeting, 2 items that were particularly difficult, and you did a really good job on those. Thank you.
Congratulations to the city clerk. Seeing no further questions or comments, then on a motion by Councilmember Lewis, seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden, the consent agenda is moved. Is there a discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Duex.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
And the consent agenda is passed. I do have 2 proclamations this afternoon. I wonder if Mr. Tollefson would meet me at the podium for the first.
So far, so good.
Okay. This afternoon, we're here at the, kind of at the request of Mr. Tollefson, but for a greater good, really. And his request was that we take a moment to think about the impact of pancreatic cancer on all of us, and particularly on his family. So I will read parts of the proclamation, and then we'll see if Mr. Tollefson can say a few words. Whereas pancreatic cancer is one of the deadliest cancers and the 4th leading cause of cancer death in the United States, and whereas in 2013 an estimated 45,220 people will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 38,460 will die with 770 deaths in the state of Wisconsin. And whereas the incidence and death rate for pancreatic cancer are increasing, and whereas the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network and its affiliates in Wisconsin support those patients currently battling pancreatic cancer, as well as those who have lost their lives to the disease, and are committed to nothing less than a cure. Now, therefore, the City Council does hereby proclaim November Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Eau Claire and urge citizens to support efforts to increase public awareness and research into early detection, causes, and treatments. Mr. Tolleson?
Thanks.
You ready?
I'm ready. Here goes.
Okay. Do you want me to read it for you, or?
Bear with me.
Okay.
I would like to thank the City Council for this proclamation recognizing November as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month for the City of Eau Claire. Eau Claire now joins the state of Wisconsin and other cities, including Madison, with this important designation. On October 27th, the Wisconsin Capitol steps were colored in purple, commemorating November as Pancreatic Cancer Month. While pancreatic cancer rates have been improving from decade to decade, this disease is still considered largely incurable. Presently, the National Cancer Institute shows that the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is less than 5%. More than likely, you will hear someone survived only months or weeks after a pancreatic cancer diagnosis, sometimes just days. By 2020, pancreatic cancer will be the second deadliest form of all cancers. The month of October and the color pink have become synonymous with breast cancer. My goal is to have purple in November have that same public awareness. With awareness comes action, and action brings results. This proclamation is a great start, but it is just a start, and there's a great challenge ahead to bring this disease under control. Almost 3 years ago, my wife, Tricia, died at 41 from this deadly disease. Her fight and determination was incredible. I hope to carry that attitude with me, making the nightmare of pancreatic cancer a thing of the past. Thank you for your patience. I want to thank David Strobel for allowing this to happen, and I hope to do this again next year with your cooperation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Many times, well, we have difficult proclamations to consider in our city. We also sometimes have the opportunity to celebrate. And I hope Mr. Tolleson will think that both are appropriate tonight, this afternoon.
I brought some friends.
I see that. They're all dressed alike. With this proclamation, we get to recognize our Parks and Recreation Department, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department for an incredible accomplishment that only this piece of paper doesn't really signify its significance. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it. I think you have a much more interesting story to tell us in your own words, but for the public's benefit, we are today proclaiming the City of Eau Claire Department of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, and recognizing that it was recognized and awarded the national accreditation status by the Commission for Accreditation of Park and Recreation Agencies just last month, right?
Correct.
Is that
Correct.
just in October? And whereas the City of Eau Claire Parks and Recreation Department and Forestry has met 144 rigorous standards related to the management in the administration of land, facilities, resources, and programs. The City Council does proudly express our pride and congratulations to the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department. And we hope we get to hear more of your story from you and your staff.
Sure.
Mr. Feber.
Thank you very much for this honor. Todd Koala and Don Compte and myself attended the national accreditation hearing in Houston, Texas last month, and we passed the test. We completed all 144 standards. We always thought we had a good department here in Eau Claire and have had a good department for many years, and we decided to go for national accreditation, where we're actually judged by our peers, by other park and recreation departments around the nation. There are 6,000 of them. There are only 119 that have gone through this process. So that puts us in the top 1% of park and recreation departments. And it's really a reflection on the entire city, because without it, you can't achieve accreditation without cooperation from your city manager, from your city council, from your finance department, HR, public works. All departments have to participate in this to meet those 144 standards. And I need to thank our staff here. I've asked them each to prepare a 20-minute talk on what they do. No, I think I'll have each of them introduce themselves, so that we want you to be able to put a face with a name. But these are the people that make sure that the grass is cut, the trees are trimmed, that the calls are taken from the public, that people are buried in the right spot, and there are all kinds of standards that we need to meet. It's a very important process, and we couldn't do it if we weren't a team. This isn't something that just a couple people do. It's something that took at least 10 years. We've been working on this. So,
and Phil, would you mention how many parks and recreation departments in the state of Wisconsin are accredited?
We were the only one for the time that it took them to go in alphabetical order from Eau Claire to Waukesha. So we are one of two. So we are sharing that. Waukesha and Eau Claire have always had a competitive edge in not only in Parks and Rec, but in other facets of city administration. We've modeled each other and successful programs after each other, and so they're also a very worthwhile accredited agency now. But with that, if you want to go, if you guys just want to say what it is you specialize in, if you'd like. Otherwise, just tell us what your job is. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm Dave Bollinger. I've one of two park maintenance supervisors with Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, and I've been with Parks and Rec for a long time in a supervisory position for over 20 years. And I think when I hear about all the stuff that we went through and some of the comments of Phil, when I started in supervision in 1991, and I said it's like I want to write a book about the place. I know that's a really tough thing, but to some degree, I came out of school, for supervision and some project management stuff. And accreditation kind of brought us close to that. I think one of the infamous lines of Phil Feber is, when we talk about all the things we do, we do this, he says, yeah, fine, prove it. So accreditation was a measurement of some of the things that we do. And I think to quantify that was a really big deal for us. So it is a big deal for us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty. I'm the Department Secretary for Parks, Rec, and Forestry, and we're really lucky to have an awesome leader that keeps us motivated and pushing in the right direction. So we really appreciate his leadership and have some pride in what we do with the Recreation, Parks, and Forestry, and Cemeteries Department. Thanks.
I'm Jill Bell, and I'm the stores clerk for the Parks Department, and I order all of our supplies and small engine parts and things like that to keep us going.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm Jason Palmer. I'm kind of a general maintenance worker within the city, and I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding Rod and Gun Park, rebuilding the ponds there, but that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Dietz. I kind of general maintenance of the parks, and I'm also the certified playground safety inspector of all the playgrounds in the city.
I'm Jared Shaw. I guess I'm skilled laborer for the Parks Department. I take care of all the baseball fields in the summer and the ski trails in the winter, and all the days of freezing and sweating and all the stuff we go through. Like, these awards make it really nice. So.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Berry. I've been the clerk at the Park, Cemetery, and Forestry Department for over 20 years.
Chad Durkop, Program Supervisor, main responsibility, Fairfax Swimming Pool. I just wanted to say that this whole process has not only made our department, I think, more efficient, but me as a professional as well. So I'm really thankful for that.
Most of you probably know Dawn. You see my face enough. I'll let Dawn go first.
Oh, okay. Well, Dawn Compte, Superintendent of Recreation, and I do want to say two things. First of all, when Waukesha heard we were going through this at the same time, they were like, darn it. And they knew right away there would be some competition, which made it good because we could share information. And number two, last week we were recognized at the Wisconsin Park and Recreation Association by the whole entire state at a banquet, so that was pretty cool.
And thank you all. I've been employed in this industry for 28 years, and the last 9 of them being here in Eau Claire. And of all the years that I've been doing this, feeling part of an organization from top to bottom, the getting the big picture view really came to flower when I came here and working with this council and with Phil. I'll share a story about Phil. I think it was the first week I worked here. He told me one of the things I was marshaled with doing was creating a Mack truck book. Well, I didn't know what that meant. And so I asked, and he said, well, if you leave here today and a Mack truck hits you on the street, somebody's got to figure out how to run know what you do when you're not here. And so the accreditation process actually ropes this all in, and theoretically, it dials in everything we do, and it's detailed. And like Phil said, it took 10 years to get here, but here we are. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We could probably round up a frame for you.
We will. Thanks.
Okay, that was very nice. That was nice. That's very nice. We do need to continue our work, however, with the business agenda and item 7, which is a resolution approving and appropriating a 2013 Bulletproof Vest program grant from the Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance. Oh. Chief Stanishevsky.
Yes, Chad Hoyer was supposed to be here, but I'm going to fill in for him today.
Okay, sure.
This award is for $4,262, which will be used to purchase body armor for our police officers. We purchase body armor on a yearly basis, so this will offset that cost that we were required to make anyway. There is a 50% match, so the total will cover about the cost of 10 vests for the year. We'll have to make more, but at least that'll cover that amount.
Questions for Chief? I see none. Thank you for standing in. On a motion then by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, item 7 is moved. Is there discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Duax?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 8 is a resolution supporting the award of a Wisconsin DNR grant to acquire property at 97 West Madison for park purposes. Mr. Fieber.
The city applied for a grant from the DNR to acquire the Charleston's property. We've been tentatively notified that we have received the grant. Because of the dollar amount is over a certain threshold, the Department of Natural Resources Board is soliciting opinions from other governmental units to determine whether or not they still favor the awarding of this grant. So tonight is a resolution that essentially reminds the DNR that we are still interested in acquiring this grant and acquiring the Charleston's property. Any questions about the grant application?
Questions, Councilmember Duex?
I presume that the grant award was based on an appraisal of the
Correct.
property. And what was the property appraised at then?
Actually, there's the Charlestons did an appraisal, and then we can do an appraisal, and the DNR can do one also if there's a discrepancy. But this is the appraised price.
Of
$431.
For the whole property?
Correct.
But the grant, it says a tentative notice of the award of a $431,000 grant. But our share of the project is $215,000.
It's half that.
Okay, well, then isn't the grant half of that? I mean, I don't. It's not 431 plus 215, right?
Well, you could, in other words, you could say that we got a grant from the state for half of the Charleston's property, which was the 215.
Okay, well that's.
But it's just easier to call it a $400,000 grant, and our share is a half.
Okay.
I asked that last time.
How would we handle? Okay, we would then inherit all the properties that are on there. There's several.
We would actually purchase it.
Yeah, the whole thing. So that would mean that if we wanted to make use of that, we would have to remove all those improvements, just like we.
Typically, that's what we'll do, and we'll either put them out for. We put structures out to bid for Habitat for Humanity, or allowed people to demo them in exchange for the materials. So it'll go out on bid, and we'll try to get the most attractive, dispose of the property in the most attractive, beneficial.
Our share will come out of the CIP?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lewis?
Thank you. The $215,000 was already allocated for this in anticipation of getting this grant?
Yes, the city keeps funds in a real estate acquisition fund just for this kind of acquisition.
And then the other question, and I probably could have gone and looked this up, I understand that, but where and how will this tie into the existing trail? Is this something where you're looking at bringing that trail up the rest of the way up First Avenue to connect to it, or is it more in connecting coming across Madison Street and heading out?
Well, it's going under Madison Street. So it would connect along First Avenue up through the West Riverside development, and then up to the High Bridge, which is getting redecked this year, and eventually connect over towards Roosevelt School and the North Crossing. So that's the general direction of trail expansion. So this is a key piece of property because this will give us access to get underneath Madison Street, under the bridge.
Councilmember Von Hayden?
Phil, what's the timeline on this? Because I'm assuming they're not moving out for a while, or what? Assuming the grant was approved and the money was available, what are we looking at when the property does become available to us?
Well, we would negotiate a closing with them that would be favorable for them also. It's my understanding they have every intention of relocating their business to another site.
Oh, okay.
So they would continue in business. So we would try to accommodate them as much as possible because we're not anywhere near complete. This isn't like the last segment in a trail that completes it. So we have some time to work with them.
Okay, so that it's a little bit like the Bartengale property that when they were ready to sell and say, okay, we now have another location.
Right. There's another link in that puzzle.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Strobel?
So does this include that whole property, or is it just like where the board storage is behind there up to the river?
Right. No, right up to the street.
So would that preclude this property from being developed, at least on the corner there, any type of commercial development at all? It would be totally.
No, we would need that in order to get handicap accessibility, to get almost like a clover leaf off of Madison Street, come down off the bridge and spin back down around underneath. I didn't bring a map with it, but would essentially look just as the trail underneath Madison Street would look almost the same as it does on the other side in Phoenix Park. and north there. So you need to have that handicap access. So we're going to need to get that trail is going to need to go through where that property is now. So there would not be the opportunity for us to have retail or some other commercial establishment there and a trail.
So it's, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Feber, for answering our questions. On a motion then by Councilmember Mitchell, seconded by Councilmember Duex, item 8 is moved. Discussion on the item? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Lewis.
I'm going to abstain because I own property down there, so I'm not going to vote.
An abstention?
Councilmember Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Duex.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 9 is a resolution approving a lease agreement with Badger Custom Windows. Mr. Schatz.
Good afternoon. The city owns a building at 2728 Davie Street. We've leased it to Badger Custom Windows since 1997. It's about a 34,500 square foot building. The company has asked to lease it again, renew the lease for 2 more years at a rate of $3,700 a month. They've been a good tenant. It's a very old building, and so we would recommend that you agree to release it to them.
Thank you, Mr. Schatz. Questions? Councilmember Von Hayden?
Whoops. Went the wrong way. Okay, thank you. The question I have there relates to the $3,700 a month. I have no problem with the rent, but do we have any commitment for any major improvements or other things that would be in that building that would be needed during this period of time, or what's the status of that?
As I mentioned, it's a very old building. As per the lease agreement, which has been for years and years with the city is in charge of the major structural areas, and the tenant is in charge of the non-structural areas. The last lease we were able to negotiate that they took over the snow removal, the landscaping, the lawn cutting too as part of it. But if something major structural should go out, it would be the city's responsibility.
Councilmember Duex?
What's the approximate value of this building?
I don't know what it's assessed at off the top of my head, but it's very old. I would say it's below average quality. It was very beat up when the city bought it. If there was not a user like Badger Custom Windows manufacturing in it, I doubt that we'd get any other user but possibly warehouse in it.
What did we pay for it? I don't know how long we've owned it, since '86?
Yeah, again, I don't have that figure with me, but we have more than made up for the acquisition costs in our rents and made considerable money off of this over the years.
In previous lease extensions, and I think this is about the 3rd or 4th time we've extended this lease, there was much talk about the option to purchase. I see it's still in the lease agreement. But what's the likelihood of that ever happening? Because each time we've had this, it's been, well, give us another 2 years, give us another 2 years. So.
To be honest with you, I think it's very unlikely. The owner is getting up in age. The business has not probably performed to his expectations over the years. And I'm guessing that, the company may not even be around very much longer.
The lease is therefore for a fairly short period. I was a little confused. The cover sheet said something about a rent increase in the 2nd year, made reference to that. And then in the lease, I was struggling to find the language. It said in the option year, the rent would be increased $100 per month. And I looked in the lease, I don't see that. Am I mistaken here?
Well, I'm looking at the cover sheet, and I don't see any reference to the rate going up. Or am I have a different cover sheet than you?
It's on the cover sheet. Now I flipped it up.
No, I do have a different cover sheet.
Yeah.
Not sure why that.
So it isn't going to increase?
There is no increase there is no option year, and there is no increase. It's a 2 years at the $3,700 a month. I'm not
No increase, okay. Finally, what was the rent in the current period that just ended, the period that's going to be ending?
Same $3,700.
Okay, it hasn't gone up now?
No.
Why are we renewing it this early? Because it's not up for a few months.
No, it's been up since May.
Oh, I was thinking 14, you're right. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Duex. We'll come back to you if you have more questions, but let's let some others have a question. Councilmember Strobel?
Yeah, just, Mike, where does the revenue from the lease go? Does that go to the general fund? Does it go to?
Goes into the Economic Development Fund.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I see none. Thank you, Mr. Schatz. I believe we're ready for a motion by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Larson. On item 9 is moved. Discussion on the item? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
Duax?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye. And that resolution passes. Item 10 is a resolution approving the dedication of right-of-way for El Dorado Boulevard from Hendrickson Drive to West MacArthur Avenue. Mr. Jensko helped us with the presentation last evening. Any more questions? Did you have more information, Mr. Jensko? Oh, okay. Questions for Mr. Jensko? I see none. Thank you. On a motion then by Councilmember Emmanuel, seconded by Councilmember Lewis, item 10 is moved. Discussion on the item. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
Duax?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye. And that resolution passes. Item 11 is a resolution on a possible confluence referendum. However, you will see in your packet that there is no resolution. It's not sure why it says a resolution, but there is not a wording for a resolution. In preparation for what may be discussion on this item, the chair just wishes to impart some clarifying points, particularly about the function of a committee of the whole. The main function of a committee of the whole actually is to lift the limit on debate. In a deliberative body, often, like our sister, the city, Eau Claire County, limits debate to the times one can speak on, the number of times one can speak, and the amount of time. Our body does not necessarily limit debate. We encourage people to speak as infrequently as they feel is necessary to make their point, but we don't have a protocol that limits the length of a person's speech nor the number of times. So the main function of dissolving into or resolving into committee of the whole is to allow debate to go on and speeches to be of any length. Even then, the committee can limit its own debate if it decides to. It can take that action. Committees of the whole are most effective when the body has had great difficulty making a decision. Debate has been heated, perhaps sometimes motions are high, and the body can see that a resolution that is satisfactory is not forthcoming. So they can resolve themselves into a committee, which allows them just to kind of work on this item of debate that has caused such consternation to that point. Even sometimes the body can break out into groups discussion groups that are moderated, and so it can be a lengthy thing, sometimes lasting more than one meeting. Also, there actually are 3 types of breaking out into a committee, which is really, the action is committing a topic to a committee. There's the traditional, or not the traditional, there is the committee of the whole, which in Robert's rules is primarily limited or functions better for large assemblies, which Robert's rules describes as bodies greater than 100 people. The decisions in the committee of the whole are not binding. They may come, they may, if they are not handed a resolution, they can create a resolution and take a vote on it, but then they rise and report their work to the deliberative body or the assembly, which is us. So a committee of the whole would rise and report to itself in our case. Again, no final decisions can be made in a committee of the whole. A less sort of formal action is something called a quasi-committee of the whole, which is Robert's rules identifies most appropriately for bodies between 50 and 100 people. Again, there are no limits on the debate, but it is not a real committee, so it cannot make resolutions of its own and motions and resolve resolutions on its own. In fact, as soon as a motion is made in a quasi-committee, the committee dissolves and it becomes the assembly as soon as a motion is made. So there's lots of room for discussion, no decision making. But even a decision in the committee of the whole is not binding. Lastly, there's a mechanism called an informal consideration, which the body can resolve itself into, or lapse into, I guess, resolve itself into. And that's mostly for small bodies like ours. And in an informal consideration mode, debate is not limited. The amount of time each person can speak or the number of times each person can speak, unless you put a limit on yourself as a committee. As with the quasi-committee, the informal consideration committee resolves without action as soon as a motion is proposed. The resolution or the motion to resolve into one of these 3 functions is debatable, requires a motion, and requires a majority to pass. And if it passes, the committee function proceeds until it takes itself out of that function, or by its own action, it is dissolved. Hopefully that helps, as I think one of our first considerations is how we're going to discuss the item before us. And with that introduction, the chair would turn to either Councilmember Von Hayden or Duax, who requested this item, if they wish to speak, or speak.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that was more than you want to know about the Committee of the Whole, so I hope we study that and there'll be a test at the end of the meeting, I hope. The Committee of the Whole is an interesting thing, but my purpose of my comments are to address why this came forward in the first place. And some things have happened or not happened in the last couple of weeks that may change my feeling or your feeling about how this needs to proceed. As you saw in the comments that were included in your packet on page, 43, I guess it is? No, it's not it. Oh, dear. Well, whatever that is. Page 47, I guess it is. It gives the options that you have. I had assumed by now, and all of us are dealing under assumptions of how this project or the referendum things are moving, And all the time, we've found that there's been, things have changed while we were expecting things to happen. By now, I thought we would have seen the wording for the referendum committee's referendum. As far as I could find out, they do not have that wording finalized. One other person I checked with said, oh yeah, it's been finalized, but it isn't out there yet. Well, in any case, I don't have anything concrete to show you. My motivation, and Councilmember Von Hayden can speak to his, was to make sure that this city council had cognizance of whatever referendum is being proposed. Because if it is being proposed by a referendum committee, they have full legal authority under Section 9.20 Wisconsin statutes to draft it within the parameters of that law, a resolution on a subject, and put it on the ballot. And we don't have anything to say about that. And by law, at this time of year, it would go on the April 1st ballot, which is the next spring election. Now, having said that, there are some deadlines they're working under. They, as a practical matter, need to have something to City Clerk Donna Ousted by the end of December. I believe in my discussions with Ms. Ousted, that's kind of what you'd said, the end of December, ideally?
Ideally, yes. They do have into January, but it makes everything very
They do have a
tight.
date into January, but it makes it very hard. After that, the clerk has 15 days, if she needs it, to certify the signatures. And after that, if there are insufficient signatures or some mistakes, the petitioners have 10 days with which to correct that. So you back all that up and then you say it has to get to the city council by early in February to be voted on to make it legally placed on the ballot. So I had thought by now we would be able to have that discussion. As of this time, we don't. And before we debate whether to resolve in a committee of the whole, and I will certainly yield to Councilmember Von Hayden on that, I would only say that perhaps the timing is earlier than it should be. If indeed looking at our options is necessary, we really can't look at what we're dealing with yet. Perhaps by early January, we would know whether the petition was successful. We most certainly would know what the words were in the referendum question, and then we could discuss this again. However, at any time between now and the deadline in February, this council on its own can authorize a referendum on any subject, whether it be advisory or binding. And I'm not going to even get into that discussion, but we do have more flexibility than the petitioners do. The petitioners are governed by statutory steps and statutory deadlines and statutory allowances. That having been said, and I mentioned this to Council President Kincaid yesterday, we may wish to not act on anything at this time, but that's really up to the body. So with that, I conclude my remarks.
Councilmember, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly. The reason we brought this forward was obviously the concept was to give the council the opportunity, if they so desired, to put forth a referendum. And obviously, at our previous meeting, the indication was we may or may not be interested in doing that. I concur with Councilmember Duax in that without seeing what the wording is of the petition or the referendum that may be out there, we may or may not want to take any action at this point in time, because I think the intent of what we were looking at here is that if the city council put forth their wording, it may or may not be more appropriate. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, because I don't know what the wording is that's coming forward from the other referendum if it does come forward. But I think at this point, because my whole interest in this is that we would get some type of item on the ballot in April so that the citizens would have the opportunity to express their opinion in relationship to the Confluence project and the city's participation therein. And that was what my main concern is. So I concur a little bit with Councilmember Duax at this point in time that maybe we're a little premature in taking any action right now.
Councilmember Worthman.
If I could just I guess following up from that, if I could ask the motioners, is I still don't fully understand what our role is. Is it, I mean, the way I see this is if citizens want to collect signatures and want to put something on the ballot, then that's through their initiative. If the city council, on the other hand, and entirely separately wants to seek citizen input, then we have to have that discussion and put something on the ballot. What is the role of this meeting, and why are we waiting to hear what the language is from the citizens who might be collecting signatures?
There is not a motion, just a little correction. There's no motion or resolution where we are sort of having a, I guess I worded that poorly, and I apologize for that, but just to make it so it's clear for everyone listening and all. Your question remains out there. Can I answer? Councilmember Duex could supply an answer, and then we'll get to you, Councilmember Strobel. Okay.
The answer to your question is yes. Every citizen has the right to start, or citizens have a right to start a petition. And yes, the city council has the right to initiate a referendum. The only purpose for this was to find out if the council, as a measure of, shall we say, looking at the city's perspective on this referendum, is do we wish to start some process to look at or study what question we might think would be more appropriate. But not knowing what the other party has presented, we don't know. If the council members are content, and I said this in my letter here, if the council members are content that they're not concerned about the wording of the referendum, or they're content with what the wording becomes, then obviously you don't need to do anything. So what's the discussion about? Do we have any sense of where we might be on this at this point? And as I said, not in support of this, but I'm saying, looks like the timing may not be correct at this point.
Councilmember Strobel?
I'm going to go back to what Councilmember Worthman said, and I'm probably not quite as diplomatic as he is, but I had the same type of question here. If the council wants to put forth a referendum to seek citizen input, I don't think that we need to wait for people to really work real hard and get 3,600 signatures and come forth with a question. I mean, are you suggesting that we wait to see what their question is and then potentially change it or do something to make it different? I guess that's where I'm confused. Why would we wait for that question?
Councilmember Lewis?
I think I was going to ask the exact same thing. My thoughts behind a referendum coming from the council is for us to say to the citizens, we're willing to listen to you, and this is a big decision, and we were going to be the big guys and say, you don't have to tell us to hold a referendum. We want to hear from you. We want to do it. And I'm also a little confused as I listen tonight going, no, if we do one now, it's going to be to countermand what they do because, oh my gosh, they could have a question we don't like. So I'm a little bit confused too. I thought when this first came up and they came to us was to give us the opportunity to craft the language, work with them, have one referendum that would solve things that we've been asked in the city to do, which is ask the citizens to, and give them the chance to vote. And so I listen to this tonight now going, it almost seems like if we do come up with a referendum question, it's in defense instead of being on the offense and saying, we want to hear and we want to know what you wanted.
Thank you. Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis, on that. However, my opinion on this was, and maybe I didn't say it quite properly, wasn't that we were going to write a referendum in defense or to attack the referendum that was out there, was to make sure we had a referendum, just exactly what you said, that would be maybe a combination of ideas of citizens and council members, so that we come up with the best referendum wording possible to give the citizens the opportunity to speak appropriately, and get their input back to the council. That's what I was talking about, and that was my opinion on this. It was that more input that we can get into the wording of this, the better off we are from a standpoint of crafting a referendum that would make the most sense for all the citizens. It wasn't one to say that, okay, the referendum group came out and said you can't do this, and we would propose a referendum saying you can do the exact opposite. That was not the intent of it. The intent of this is to get the best wording possible to get the best result. And if it means that the council did some wordsmithing along with what the referendum people put together and came up with a better solution, I think that would make the best result for everybody.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Thank you. I'm not sure if my comments are appropriate because I'm really not sure where we're going with this, but I have to disagree with Councilmember Von Hayden. I absolutely do not want a referendum. I understand that a group of people do, and that if they collect the signatures, there will be one. But I am not interested in having the city council do a referendum. I appreciate that's what you brought forward, but I think, as I said before, that this is too complex an issue to have a referendum, and I believe that we have heard more than enough from the citizens of this community about the project and what they want. So I'm inclined, if we're going to vote no on the council doing a referendum, or to postpone this indefinitely. I'm not sure what to do next, but whatever it is, I don't want the council to do a referendum.
Other discussion? Councilmember Wilson?
I just want to follow up with clarification, and I apologize, I don't fully understand this, but Council Members Duax and Von Hayden, is it your impression that, or what you had thought was the referendum committee would have a draft language and that the city council would then add another question potentially to the ballot? I don't understand how that would work. Is that even feasible? What was your thinking?
Councilmember Duax?
First of all, I want to say that I concur with the remarks made by Councilmember Von Hayden. It was to try to see that we get the best question on the ballot. Now, as to tactics, Mr. Worthman's question is, what we're going to do? Have a, competing referenda? No. I think if I understand the group, taking them at what they said, that they came out saying, please, City Council, put this on a ballot. But if you don't, we're prepared to go ahead and put it on the ballot ourselves through petitions. Okay. That invitation was made. That's why this question was put on the previous agenda, and we did discuss it, amongst other things related to the pledge on the Confluence project. However, as you know, we had a long evening discussion that got on, and we ended up postponing this till this meeting so we can continue the discussion. I think the question is still open. Do you want to do a referendum under any circumstances? Councilmember Mitchell has indicated her preference not for not having a referendum. But that's what we need to do, is discuss it at some point. Now, if the petitions come forward and people are satisfied with the referendum wording, they say, hey, fine with me. Maybe you don't support it, but you think it's an honest, decent, a fair question, then there's nothing more to do. But what happens if the question turns out to be, and I thought we'd have that by now, we don't. What happens if it turns out to be something that is going to be confusing, doesn't represent really what we're looking at, and we think we have a better idea? Would you end up with competing referenda? No. I guess that's to be determined. Our options are maybe limited, but we'd have to cross that bridge when we get to it. So, as I said at the beginning, a few minutes ago, I think this probably isn't the time to even finish the discussion until we know more. Maybe it'll be early January.
Councilmember Mitchell?
So is that a motion to postpone?
There really isn't a motion on the floor. There's no motion.
We do this?
We could create a motion indicating some sort of decision you'd like us to come to. Is that your intent?
I guess so. That would be my intent, and I'll see how it works. I mean, because we don't have a specific proposal in front of us, I would move that the council schedule discussion on the possible consideration of a possible referendum for the first meeting in January. I believe.
Before you make that motion, can I ask a question?
Councilmember Klinkhammer?
Can't we just move to close or end the discussion, and then as circumstances dictate, if it needs to come back, can't you bring it? Can it return to us? Can't we just close this discussion at this point?
In my opinion, I think you can, yes.
And no action would be no action. We had a discussion.
That's right, correct.
But now there is a motion on the floor, a motion that asks council to schedule a discussion of consideration of a possible referendum in, was it at the first meeting in
January?
The first
I
meeting
didn't look at my calendar, so
in January.
what's the first meeting?
I believe it is January 7th and 8th.
Okay. So is there a second? Is there a second?
I would withdraw my motion if Councilmember Klinkhammer's motion has more sense for most people. If not, I would be glad to renew it, but if you want to close discussion, then you can vote on closing it. And you can always bring it up at that appropriate time, wherever it may be. December, January, whatever.
The motioner has withdrawn his motion. Councilmember Larson, a new perspective.
I was just going to, do we have an official motion from Councilmember Klinkhammer? Because I would second it.
I will move we close debate on this item.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to close debate. I would have to look up whether that's debatable.
No, it's not. Motion to close debate is not.
I don't think it is.
Two-thirds vote required.
Requires a two-thirds vote, but it's not debatable. The motion before the body then is to close debate. A roll call vote is in order. An aye vote closes debate. Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, Mr. Attorney? No? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Larson.
Aye.
Lewis.
No.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
No.
Von Hayden.
No.
Worthman.
No.
Duax.
No.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
And the motion fails on a 5-5 vote. We are back discussing the item before us. Councilmember Duix?
May I renew my motion that I withdrew?
You may. I still need to seek a second.
Okay.
Does everyone understand the motion? The motion is to schedule a discussion of a consideration of a possible referendum at the January 7th or 8th meeting. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? The motion dies for lack of a second. Councilmember Lewis?
I'm trying to think of how to word this, but I'd actually like this council to decide up or down whether they want a referendum or not. Not are we going to debate this again in January or not. So I maybe could ask the city attorney to help with how you would draft this, but I would like to move that that the council does consider bringing forth a referendum of its own.
Point of order, or point of inquiry?
Councilmember Worthman?
Would that have to be noticed, publicly noticed, or does this notice account for the creation of such a resolution?
I don't have a second yet, and did you have a time in mind, Councilmember Lewis?
Sure, that we would have draft language in place before our next council meeting.
Second.
That would be the second meeting in November, and seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden. Now your point of inquiry.
I'm sorry.
Clarification.
Could I just get a clarification of the motion, of the wording?
Sure, the motion is that this council votes to come up with a referendum question of their own and have draft language prepared by the next council meeting.
So your motion wants us to decide tonight, and not in 2 weeks. We decide tonight whether we're going to place a referendum on the ballot, and if so, draft language is due. It'd be pretty hard to vote on nothing with the draft language. Be pretty hard. And we're just going to get to Councilmember Worthman's question first. It's lingering out there.
No,
I actually forgot your question.
I'll withdraw it, but I'll let Councilmember Duack speak first, but it's essentially, I just want to make sure that we're not voting on something that wasn't properly noticed.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Duack?
I'm asking the point of inquiry of the motion, of the mover of the motion. I'm sorry. Thank you for your assistance. You're asking that a resolution be drafted, not that we approve it, but drafted, and then we would consider it, and it would be properly noticed at the next meeting, which is the 26th of November? Is that?
Not what she said.
Well, now, then because we can't commit the council to approve a resolution we haven't seen, but you're asking that the staff or someone draft a resolution to bring it in for our consideration at the next meeting, which would be November 26th. Is that correct?
Yes, let's put it to the vote that way, that we're going on record that we want to see a referendum question that could go on the ballot from this council.
A draft resolution.
Well, it would have to be a draft unless we're going to stay here tonight and craft it.
That's what I was, okay.
Councilmember Larson?
I have a question for the movers. Would this be a binding or an advisory referendum?
Or can we speak freely, somewhat freely here tonight? I don't want to postpone this anymore, and I'd like to actually have an up or down vote. Is this council on record supporting that this council wants to go forward with a referendum or not? I don't know that we can make that decision tonight, Eric, if it would, Mr. Larson, if it's going to be binding or a advisory. There's a lot to talk about here, but when are we going to do that? And maybe we just go forward with language and that decision when it comes to us, one of the votes that we'd have to take. Will this be an advisory referendum or is it going to be a binding referendum? And we would make that decision. But we've been talking about this, and I'd kind of like to see the council go on record saying we're for it or we're against it. We had people speak tonight that said they are against it. No referendum. We don't need to do it. And I'm just asking for an up or down vote on where we're going to go with this.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Did you
Is that
have a question?
I'm still confused because I can't vote on something that I don't know. We don't know the wording. We don't even know if it's binding or advisory. I think we at least should have that on the table, that issue on the table.
Councilmember Stroll?
Yeah, and I thought I heard that the wording would be potentially drafted and come forth at the next meeting, and at that point in time, it could be decided whether we wanted it to be advisory or not.
Well, I think this question has...
Councilmember Lewis?
Sure, thank you. This question has kind of moved from where I started, which was really a consideration. Would we even consider coming up with a referendum question? And where to now? Are we drafting the question, and is it going to be binding, and is it or advisory? And can we take a vote here tonight that says how many in this room would consider supporting any type of referendum coming out of this body?
Councilmember Mitchell?
May I ask you a referendum on what? What exactly would the referendum be about?
I think
Councilmember
that's
Lewis?
a question that our attorney would have to help us with as to what is still open. We've already done a pledge which commits certain things. What parts of this could we actually still hold a referendum on? That would be, and that's where when we talk about staff helping put this together, depending on how long this discussion wants to go tonight, we'd have to know what avenues are still in front of us. And do we want to do that? I think we heard the last time there was a comment made here. It was this, we said it pretty loud and clear where this council felt a referendum was going. And that we kind of heard the feeling here was expressed. I'd like just to solve this, not postpone it till January. Is this discussion done, or is this discussion going to continue?
Councilmember Larson?
I don't think it's a good procedure or fair or even wise to approach a referendum the way we have been over the past couple of months. Clearly, there are some people on the council who think we should have a referendum. I think it's incumbent on those people to make a proposal, draft a language for a referendum, use the city attorney's office and city staff to help draft the language for this referendum, and then bring it to the council and we can vote on it. But I don't think it's, we have nothing to vote on at this stage. If someone, there's nothing stopping any member of this council to bring a draft referendum to the meeting in January. We don't need a nebulous vote about nothing tonight in order to do that. It can be done without a vote of the council.
Councilmember Drex?
Well, in response to the comments, that's exactly why I proposed that we just have an informal discussion or committee of the whole discussion to air some of these various points of view and the questions. Yes, anytime any person could bring forth a referendum, but there's no sense doing that if everybody has 6 different ideas and then you bring forth, we'll be here all evening debating amendments to the resolution on a referendum or not to have it. What I was trying to get out of this informally was a discussion at this point in time as to where we were we even interested in it or not, fine, and then to move on. And then secondly, because of timing, perhaps we could postpone this. Now, it would be nice to get it up or down tonight. I don't know that that's absolutely necessary. Maybe it satisfies some people, but on the other hand, whether we voted tonight to do it or not to do it, there's plenty of time to think about it before the deadline looms in February. Now, having said that, that's true. Any council member can bring forth a referendum question. What I was trying to hope to get out of this is 11 people weighing in, giving input, so that a person who might want to recommend something might have a better idea of what seems to be a reasonable course. In other words, if there was any reasonable course that most folks most members could support. So I hope that clarifies the clarification.
Councilmember Von Hayden?
Yeah. I think Councilmember Lewis is looking at something a little bit different here, and this was more of not the wording of the referendum, not really the referendum itself, was more or less saying, is this council interested in even considering putting a referendum forward? And that's really what we're looking at saying is if they're not, then we're wasting our time talking about it, because as Councilmember Mitchell said, it really isn't the wording of the referendum. I just don't think, and I'm not opposing your viewpoint, that's your opinion, and every council member has the right. But if the majority of the council members have that same opinion, why would we waste time bringing something forward? Because it doesn't make any difference how it's crafted or how it's worded. It will not be approved.
Councilmember Larson?
With respect, I think it is an issue what the referendum is going to say and whether it's going to be binding or non-binding. My opinion about a referendum depends on those things. And so I don't think it's fair to ask the rest of us or anyone to to make it, I just don't think this is the appropriate way to handle this important of a question.
Councilmember Klinkhammer?
Thank you, Madam President. When I proposed or made the motion to end the discussion, it was not, my intent was to enable this to come forward when circumstances allowed for a more clearer and more definitive discussion, rather than specify a day. That was only the purpose of my motion. Voting on the motion that's on the floor at this point is not a vote for or against a referendum. It's a vote, well, if you vote for it, I guess it's fine, but I just don't think it would be the responsible thing to do to vote for this, because there are so many questions that need to be addressed first.
Okay, the motion remains in front of the body. Barring further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the following motion. The motion being that the council considers bringing forth a referendum with draft language at its next meeting. Is that close to, is that what you had, Madam City Clerk? Does that embody your wishes? Okay. You ready?
Could I ask a point of
Councilmember
clarification?
Wiseman?
So what if this is voted up, what would occur?
I'm not sure.
I need to know that. This makes no sense to me. If we're sending it, this seems like a directive to me, but if we're sending a directive, we should be more clear about what we're asking for.
Well, can we go back to the original question I had, which was, and Councilmember Von Hayden said it very well, just a move of whether we want to move the discussion forward on having a referendum. Now, it's really the interest of this body, and that's where I'm not quite sure how you take a vote on if we're going to continue forward with this or not. And if there's nothing to do, I'll pull it back. I mean, I'll withdraw the motion. There doesn't appear that we can take a vote on whether or not we are going to move forward with the referendum question. We've used up a lot of time on this that just says, I'll remove my motion.
The council member, the mover, withdraws her motion. So we're back to a discussion. Councilmember Larson?
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for withdrawing your motion. I think we, since Councilmember Klinkhammer's motion failed, which I think would not have precluded us from discussing this in January anyway, I would recommend that we go back to Councilmember Duax's motion, which makes a positive assertion that we will discuss it in January again, I guess.
Is that a motion, Councilmember Larson? Or?
No, it's a recommendation, I guess.
Okay. We'll consider it as a discussion item and a recommendation. Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Madam President. I wouldn't the reason I didn't support Councilmember Duax's earlier motion is because if a referendum committee is going to start collecting signatures, they'll be almost toward the end of their campaign and collecting 3,500 signatures. What is our role at that point? They've already knocked the doors. They've already crafted a question. I don't understand what our role would be except for to affirm it, to be on the ballot.
Is that a rhetorical question? I'm not sure anyone is quite sure, but it sounds like Councilmember Duax has an opinion.
That was precisely the reason that because so many people have different perspectives on this and there's so many parts of this you need to take apart, the idea was to have a thorough discussion tonight, out of which we may or may not have come out with a consensus. Or maybe we'd agree not to agree to anything, in which case we've done our due diligence. Then I suggested that we postpone it to another date, and you're suggesting another issue is, well, okay, they've already got their referendum turned in, presumably, then what do you do? Well, that's the question. You would then sit in January and say, well, the referendum was turned in, we don't have any problems, let's just leave it alone. Or we do have a problem with the question, then what do we do? I guess that this is like a triage. You're going to go down these various steps as we get closer to a time when we may or may not be faced with a referendum. So with that motion by Councilmember Lewis withdrawn, and with having not reached a agreement on when we would talk about this or if we would talk about it, I think, thank you for your suggestion, Councilmember Larson, but I've tried postponing it twice and it didn't seem to get anywhere. So I'll go back to just what Councilmember Klinkhammer indicated was, let's just close the discussion and give some time to think on it. And obviously any person or persons on this council can bring this up at a future date with whatever proposal they want. I was only trying to facilitate the discussions so that we might come up with some ideas, but it doesn't seem that we're gelling to a point where one can sift out of that a particular direction.
Mr. City Attorney, did you have a wish to?
Yes, I think we're moving back in that direction again of a motion to table perhaps, or a motion to postpone it indefinitely. Because really, and I think that was part of the challenge with a few of the other motions, what we have in front of us is a discussion item that was originally, a study issue. It doesn't have a specific action item. But it was postponed by council action to the business agenda. So that's sort of the unusual setting of it. I think postponing this item based on the discussion would be my recommendation, as Councilmember Duax just indicated this last time, with the recognition that if there are members that have an interest in placing an item on the referendum, of a referendum question, whether binding or non-binding, that would be in order at a future meeting. Know the time is of the essence. The first meeting in January is the deadline. Moving into February is not an option. 70 days prior is when the questions need to be submitted. And if it comes to us by direct legislation, that will come in front of you. So they need to back, if that is something that a citizen group pursues, they need to back it up even further because they need to give council time to consider it. That's part of the direct legislation. Then you will have that option of either adopting the ordinance or resolution as they propose it, or placing it on the ballot if it's a proper subject of direct legislation. I have had no communication with any of those groups interested in doing that, so I don't have any language. It doesn't sound like you do either. So we've had that discussion. I think at this point, a motion to postpone would be in order.
Councilmember Strobel?
Yeah. So per Councilmember Larson's suggestion, then Attorney Nick, if a person on this council wanted to come to you to work on a question to bring forth at another meeting, is that something that would be acceptable?
Well, it would be the same as any other action. So it's nothing that has council's authority at this point, but in terms of assisting any members to place an item on the agenda, if there's a mover and a seconder, you bet, we'll help out.
So if the body wishes, there could be a motion to postpone, or we could just end discussion.
Motion to postpone?
Second.
Motion to postpone indefinitely?
A motion to postpone indefinitely, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer. Discussion on that motion. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lewis.
Point of order, can we have a clarification of postpone indefinitely? Does that end discussion at this point?
That does end discussion at this meeting.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Duax.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
And the motion to postpone passes. We do have two ordinances for action tonight. Item 12 is an ordinance rezoning property along County T, north of Folsom, for the Wild Ridge Golf Course from TR1A to R1. Questions for Mr. Tufti or the Planning Department? Seeing none, on a motion by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Worthman, item 12 is moved. Is there discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
Duax?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis?
Aye. That ordinance is adopted. Our final ordinance for action is item 13, an ordinance amending the official map by deleting Hendrickson Drive Service Road from Craig Road to MacArthur Avenue. Does council have questions regarding this item? On a motion then by Councilmember Lewis, seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden, item 13 is moved. Discussion on the item? There being none? Oh, Councilmember Strobel? Oh, sorry, okay. Clerk, please call the roll. Excuse me.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
Duax?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Lewis?
Aye. In our ordinances for introduction, we'll be considering at our next meeting two parking amendments. The first is an ordinance amending Title IX of the City Code entitled Parking During Specific Hours by adding parking prohibited between 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. for Platt Street, both sides from 280 feet east of 6th Street to 100 feet west of Kendall Street. And secondly, an ordinance amending Table 8 of the City Code, Parking Prohibited, by changing the no parking on Garfield Avenue, parking on Garfield Avenue, State Street to Park Avenue, from the north side to the south side. Does council wish to suspend the rules and take up either ordinance tonight? I see no such desire. Announcements and directives are now in order. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. On tomorrow, Wednesday morning, we're having a Public Works Media Day at the Central Maintenance Facility at 11 a.m. Just to kind of do some pre-publicity and make aware of some of the issues dealing with snow and ice control and public works in general. So we're kind of trying to try a different approach on how to get the word out. And then on Friday morning, 7 a.m. is the Chamber of Commerce Eggs and Issue, and that's at the Chamber facility with the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Other announcements or directives? On a motion then by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Emanuel, this meeting is adjourned without objection.
This was a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Council meeting. This program was recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.